Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to today's meeting with the Heritage Advisory Committee. This is the Terms of Reference workshop. And with that said, I will turn it over to staff and we will begin the workshop today. Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, yes. I'm just looking at my thing here. Okay, and so we do have a deputation, and that is from Mr. Sullivan here. So Jim, whenever you're ready, please go ahead, sir. Thank you. And I will remind you that with deputations, you are limited to 5 minutes. Is that correct, Alex? Yes? Okay, thank you.
I hope you don't have a timer on because it could be 5 minutes. Last time I did it,
Turn your microphone on, please.
Nice, I've only got a little bit more to think.
Okay.
All right, we'll do our best to work with you.
Alrighty. Okay, thank you. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Jim Sullivan. I lived in Meaford for the past 10 years, and I'm a past member of the Meaford Heritage Advisory Committee, having served from its initiation for 2 terms. Last term, we extended for an extra year and a half. Prior to this, I was an executive board member of a National Historic Site and Museum, and member and chair of a heritage committee in the 905 area. As well, I was a member of the Historical Society. I've attended workshops by Dr. Robert Shipley and others, worked on heritage policy for official plans and heritage designations, established a municipal register for over 300 properties, and I've I should say I was also the owner, or should I say caretaker, of a historic 1856 home that I restored room by room. So you might say that I have an interest in heritage. I had placed something in front of you, which is the terms of reference that this committee passed, this previous committee passed at a heritage meeting. So I had passed it out. Unfortunately, apparently I wasn't allowed to do that, but if anyone would like to have a copy, I can send it to them electronically. But there is a big difference between the terms of reference that I had put in front of you and the one that's on today's agenda. The reason I'm here is I'm hoping to bring those differences to you so you could choose which one you would sooner have to guide you. Because you have a position as the representatives of this community in the preservation, and not only preservation, but the promotion of heritage in the municipality. Like I said before, September 13th in our Heritage Committee meeting, we passed a motion that this workshop that you're having right now would happen. We were hoping it would happen during our term, but I'm glad it's happening right now. And the reason this got to here was it was taken out of the original terms of reference. All the committees were put in a pile with basically the same terms of reference. And a number of us, 4 of us non-committee members, thought that because this committee is not just a regular committee of council, the person as chair sitting there today is the one that made sure this got pulled. And he made sure that there was a motion passed at a council meeting that this be set up. So this is because of the man sitting behind the big seat up there. So the terms of reference on today's agenda is not the one put together by the 4 non-council members of the previous Heritage Committee, nor the one in the motion unanimously passed at that committee meeting. The terms of reference mentioned for 2015, that's actually been superseded. There was one done in 2019. So I had placed one in front of you that was about 8 pages long. There's a reason that one was chosen by this 4-member team. It's modeled on the terms of reference from the municipality of Chatham-Kent. And that municipality's terms, they were used to demonstrate how a committee's terms should be set up. And it was shown in the original Ontario Heritage Toolkit. And it's also in the latest revision. There is another one out there, hasn't been passed yet, but it's highest on the list. And if you look at the toolkit under setting up committees, all the things in the Chatham-Kent one, which is in this one, is shown what you really need to have in a terms of reference. So there's, so that alone should speak to its worth. Why it's in the toolkit, both the old one and the new one. That set of terms, the Chatham-Kent one, was used, modified to be germane to Meaford. It was done by the 4 non-council members of the committee. The statement of purpose may seem unneeded, but this document will be posted on the municipal website. It won't just be for the existing members of this committee. It'll be for councils and the public's use and future candidates for the committee roles. What makes this committee different from the other committees? It was asked at that council meeting. A councillor brought it up, said, why should this one get pulled? And it was actually the director of development that said, the reason for that is because it is a statutory committee and it's governed by the Ontario Heritage Act. So those specifics are noted in this mandate, in the one that the 4 members did, that was in front of you. And the mandate is under the statutory roles. As well, there's a separate list of non-statutory roles, which opens up a wider spectrum, okay? You have more opportunities, future opportunities. You don't have to do them all. It's not a work plan. But if they aren't in your terms of reference, you may not be able to do them. So I'm saying it's a non-statutory role that has to be in the bylaw. So it is for the betterment of Meaford.
Jim, I can give you 1 more minute if you don't mind.
Oh, God. Okay, it's a statutory committee. We were hoping the term could be extended 6 months past the term of council, so there'd be an overlap. So you're not going to run into an applicant trying to get a permit and there's no Heritage Committee there to accept it. So if they're overlapped for 6 months, it took 1.5 years before this council actually passed the bylaws for these new committees. So it helps to have that 6-month overlap in there. And the dates should be published at the beginning of the year. And you need at least 10 of them. Otherwise, these permits languish. And we don't want that. It's very important that they're not. We have to look at applicants as being our customers. You know, they're our clients. We're trying to help them. We're trying to speed their process along. They have a hard enough time to get a building permit. I know I've done that. I've also been the recipient as a chair of another heritage committee where we would get 3 or 4 permits at a time. And we always made sure we got them done at the very, very next council meeting. We had monthly meetings and they should be monthly. If you don't need to have a committee meeting, you could cancel it, but if it's not there, the applicants don't know. We've had problems before. The last Heritage Committee would have an applicant say, I've been trying for 2 months to get to speak to you guys, and it just didn't happen.
Jim, would you mind just concluding? If you don't
Sorry?
mind? Can you please conclude?
Can I conclude?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I'm hoping that you will read this document and consider using this terms of reference as a basis for your discussion today and maintain the main features of the terms of reference which you used to have. And if anybody wants to ask me a question, I could probably finish what I was going to say here.
Very good. Mr. Sullivan, thank you so much. Very good points, and we'll take that under consideration.
Yep, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
We don't, this is not a question and answer period. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Okay. And I do have to apologize. I did skip over one part of the agenda, which was the disclosure of pecuniary interest. Is there anybody at the table that has any pecuniary interest with regard to the terms of reference workshop today? And seeing none, I'll just remind you that if that does come up, just please speak up and bring that forward. Okay, thank you. Okay, so next we are on to the terms of reference workshop. So I'll toss it over to staff and we'll kick this off. Thank you.
So I think what we hope to do would be to go section by section and look at some of the sections and see, get your feedback on those and how those might be improved or fleshed out a little bit. One thing we wanted to note was that there was a real attempt on staff to put together terms of references for all of the advisory committees on the same template with some of the same sections. While they may have different content within those sections, this brings them to be a little bit more familiar. So each terms of reference is following the same template, has the same basis and all of that. So that's what you're seeing here today, is an attempt of staff to do that. Alex, were you expecting we would start with the mission statement first?
Yes, I think what we'll do, I will say for the purposes of sort of the procedural things, I don't think it would be necessary to move and second a motion for every single change and every single edit, if that's okay with you, Chair Forder. I think we can keep this, because it's sort of a workshop setting, we can keep it sort of informal. The chair will obviously make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. And I think the best thing to do would, yes, to just be go through each section, and you're free to ask any questions that you have. And we will go from there.
Sounds great. So we're looking at the mission statement. Is there anything any comments anybody at the table here would like to make? That all looks good. Yes, Vic, go right ahead. And don't forget to click your mic.
I do have a copy of the draft terms of reference that Jim did put out here today, and they were circulated actually among the committee by yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
So
there's a little bit of confusion here. So the terms of reference that was done by the,
yeah, Peter, I don't think we can use that as reference material at the table right now.
yeah, it wasn't provided to me prior to the meeting, so it wasn't a part of the agenda. I mean, we can move a motion to consider it today if that's what the committee would like.
Other than technical reasons or anything, so why would we at least look at it?
I'd make,
Through the chair.
Jan, can you put your mic on?
Through the chair, I believe that this was circulated, was it not, by the chair to the members a while back?
This was a little while ago. I was under the impression that staff already had this document. So I apologize if you guys hadn't.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of there was a miscommunication there. This document was on one of our previous agendas.
Yes.
So it was made public. I can't confirm that because I haven't seen it prior to literally 5 minutes ago. So I think if that's what the committee would like to do, is consider this terms of reference that, I just want to be clear, it wasn't passed or adopted. The last terms of reference was adopted in 2019. Actually, Jim is correct. And that was our error, not including the 2019 terms of reference on the agenda. This was a working copy, and we had the committee pass a motion to actually recommend to council to hold this workshop, and then that's ultimately was what was passed. So this document is very much, it can be considered as working material. And if that's what the committee wants, we can move and second a motion to also put this on the floor and consider it. I think we need to be mindful of the copy that staff has provided. And then now we're also considering this one that I don't know the committee has. I'm just a little bit confused, but if the committee did receive it, that might be a different story.
Okay, well, pardon me one second. So I'll just put it to the table here. I'll need a first and second if we want to consider this reference material for the purposes of our discussion today.
Clarification.
Sorry, Jan, yes.
We're talking about the draft terms of reference that was put through by the last committee, correct?
Correct.
And that is what you're saying you want to put on the table now?
Yeah, so this would be
Sure.
on November 29th, 2023, we had the meeting where this copy was part of the agenda and it was part of the discussion. And then that's ultimately what led the committee to pass a motion to recommend to council to have this workshop. We didn't pass a motion with regards to this particular document. It was just to have this workshop in general. So the motion that would be on the table would be to consider this copy from the November 29th meeting in this workshop discussion.
And clarification through the chair, this is the stuff that has already been circulated to the members. We should have all got it at some point. It's a draft.
I can't confirm that because I'm only
I can
just getting
confirm
this
that.
today.
You
So
can
yeah,
confirm
that,
it,
I
right.
can't
So-
confirm that, but if the chair would like to, then.
Whatever makes it the most simple, because the issues are important to deal with.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
I think if we, Vic, were you gonna first that? Sorry, I thought you put your hand up for that. Yes.
I've got a question, just to be clear, since
Sure.
I'm new. So on the agenda today, there's the new Heritage Advisory Committee Terms of Reference Draft Working Copy, which we can view online. So that is different from the attachment, Brendan, that you sent out?
Yes, the attachment was the document that's in question right now.
And that's the same one that Mr. Sullivan was referring to?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right, because of how it's laid out, it's different. So I
Mhm.
just want to make sure when we're going back and forth, I didn't want to become confused.
Yeah, so.
I've read both, but yeah.
So, yeah, if we can just use the terms, so Mr. Sullivan's reference copy, if we have a first and second for that, we would use that as reference material for the purposes of discussion
Okay.
today. So if there's any elements of that terms of reference that we feel would enhance the working copy, then somebody at the table can bring that forward and we can discuss how that would look.
Thanks.
So right now, I just want to make sure with this reference material in question, I just need to get a first and second so we can use that as material for discussion today. So I got a first by Vic, and were you doing that, Joanne? Sorry, will you put your hand up?
Oh, yeah, no, I was just even gonna be needed a copy,
Okay.
but I can first
You're-
it.
Okay, so Vic will be first and you'll be second.
Second.
Joanne, thank you very much. Okay, and all in favor? Okay, and that's passed. Thank you, guys. Okay. Oh, yes, of course. Here you go. I have a copy of that. Thank you. And sorry for any confusion, guys. So that's being passed around. Vic, please go right ahead.
Before we get into going at it section by section, I did want to some extent, echo what Jim was saying. I mean, there's often questions at this committee about what we could and should be doing at various points, if we should be reaching out, doing education, can we be formulating, information to provide to potential people who are doing new development, say in the Heritage District. And it's never been covered by the terms of reference. Bert touched on a lot of what our role can and should be doing at that workshop we had a month or so ago. That isn't in this draft version. I really think this is important to have those elements in the term so that members, we understand and are encouraged to pursue these kind of, additional efforts beyond simply looking at permit applications. If they're in the terms, they can be referred to. We won't waste time wondering if it's within our mandate, and we can be reminded that there are things we can do to help promote heritage. So my big question is, why not? We are including it now, but why not see this as a very important part of it and expand on the terms of reference with many of the elements that are in here?
Very good question. Either Alex or Denise, do you guys have a comment on that at all?
So I think what I'm hearing is that there is an interest in having things beyond just the statutory portions that Bert had referenced in the training. And I think that was always inherent in the previous terms of reference, but maybe not fleshed out in specifics. And we always, as a member previously of the committee for some time, we always did that work. So I think it was always supported by even the more bare bones version of the terms of reference that we had before. But if we want to get into specifics, those are things we could do. The only thing I'm worried about is, so the mission statement isn't really that specific. It's kind of why, what is the point of the committee? And so when we get into kind of the bones of like, what is the committee's job, what are the tasks and things like that, my only concern is that we don't get too specific or granular so that if it's so specific, then if something new comes up over the next term, we will just be looking at this terms of reference and say, oh, it doesn't fit because if we leave it fairly open, that there are some other tasks like research and programming and things like that and outreach, then that way we don't have to say it's a plaque program or it's a walking tour or it's, a special website for heritage or something like that. If we get away from right into the specifics, then I think as long as we leave the framework there, the committee can spend time doing some of those things over the next while without missing the opportunity if something new comes up that we haven't thought of. Like, I think it should be broad enough that it allows for some flexibility, like doing research on properties or doing some of the outreach stuff that we talked about previous without saying exactly what those things are, because I don't think we know that yet. It would be something that maybe would take more time to flesh out, if that makes sense. And I think we reviewed a number of terms of reference across other municipalities when we were kind of preparing, and then we started with this more bare bones version that meets our template, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Denise. And comments, are these related to Denise's comments? Yeah, okay. So I know Simon was in the queue here, so I'll let you go ahead.
I think personally, I agree with both Denise and the comments on public engagement. There's something I had as an open question as to how we educate the public on methods of putting in applications and how we respond to public when inquiries come in, where they're directed, and the methods of concise. But also I'd like to see as part of the broader agenda of how we engage with the public, whether it is within our remit or whether it goes through staff.
Okay, very good. And if anybody has any suggestions with regards to wording, just please let me know. Jan, go ahead. Thank you.
I must agree with Denise on the mission statement. The way it's put forward here, it allows council to specify by a bylaw to anything they feel is important, because heritage changes so radically, constantly, with new owners and new community advances, this kind of thing. But I think this mission statement, if we stay, as Denise is saying, that is fairly general, and then the specifics can come in to the other things. The mission statement is just what we believe we want for heritage in the municipality of Meaford.
Thank you, Jan. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I don't know whether it's in the mission statement or it's somewhere else in the document. And I think the point is that these things that have been talked about, education and reaching out, it's not really referred to anywhere in the current proposed, that's the way I read it. So I don't know whether it should go in the mission statement or not. And I understand the concern about keeping it general, except I guess the only comment I make, there's fairly standard wording, with the committee envisaged that its work would include the following without limiting the generality that we're going, right? You just keep it that kind of wording, that you're not limiting. This is not meant to be exclusive, right? And this is meant to be, as examples would include, but not be limited to, something along those lines that would accommodate the concerns of people that want some specifics without tying the hands if there's something you think that's broader than that or that comes up that's not covered by that. You're not making an exhaustive list. It's just the opposite. These are meant to be examples only.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, any other comments with regards to the mission statement? Anybody want to make any changes?
As I say, I'm not sure that what I'm saying is in the mission statement, because what we've talked about is, in a way, is sort of broader. The mission statement's fairly generic, and
yes,
they always are. And frankly, I don't think they mean much, but I know that you have to have one. someone could hold you to it, I suppose, later,
Mhm.
but I think somewhere in the document, you would want to have it. Where you put it, I guess, is a matter of discussion.
So I think as we move our way down the terms of references, if there is an opportunity to add something that is germane to your comments, then we can bring that forward at that time. Okay, so I think everybody's happy so far with the mission statement. Is that correct? Vic, go
I
ahead.
would just possibly add some kind of general statement about recognizing that heritage is an important part of the fabric of Meaford or something like that, comma, and then go into the other stuff. I mean, the conservation district plan is extensive and it says as specified, so there's a lot of room for, including in the mandate later on, but just, I think somewhere it should be, especially if it's right off the top, it should say heritage is important. I mean, this is really why we're here.
Okay. Denise, do you have any feedback on that? Any suggestions perhaps?
Well, just reviewing the one from 2019, so we don't have that in front of us, but just looking at it, did have a statement which added a little bit more. It reads, in an effort to appropriately guide and manage physical change and the development within the Heritage District, the Heritage Committee shall make recommendations to Council about Meaford's built heritage and other heritage features. I think it may not be what you're looking for, but I think what you're saying, Vic, if I'm hearing it correctly, is that there isn't that the explanation, the back end of like, okay, so this says what the committee does. And I think what we're looking for maybe is a little bit more on the why, because heritage has been deemed important and because it adds to the cultural value, that kind of a statement. Is that what I'm hearing? Am I getting that? Okay.
And just something for consideration, I did make a note on that, and I had something along the lines of this committee aims to foster community pride, attract tourism, and support economic growth through the preservation of Meaford's rich heritage. So I don't know if that's sort of along the lines, but I did make some notes with regards to the importance of the heritage, particularly in the Heritage District. So do we want to add anything like that to the mission statement? How's everybody feeling about this? Maybe Alex with your.
I was just, the way we were thinking about going about everything is if we would collect everybody's comments from today, and then at our next meeting, which is August 14th, not too far away, we would actually bring it back with all the edits that you all proposed today. It's just a little bit easier than us kind of typing while everybody's watching and, oh no, actually I meant, so if we will be collecting everything you are providing, and then the next meeting we will present, okay guys, this is the copy that we will bring to council in September to actually approve and adopt. So that was what we kind of discussed might be the easiest way to go about it. So we are jotting down all of your suggestions.
Sorry, and if I also might say, I'm assuming because some of these things haven't been raised with you guys before, with your team before, and you may have some additional thoughts after you go away and think about it. I think, speaking for myself, of course, I would be open to hearing if you've got some adjustments, show what we had proposed, and then you say, or here's what's wrong with it, or here's what we think might be better. So it's not meant to be, take it away and it's exactly what this has to be, because you may have other ideas, and we're not, at least that's my thoughts.
Yeah, no, very good, Peter. Thank you very much. Great. So any other feedback with regards to the mission statement? Everybody's okay with this for now? Okay, wonderful. So we can move on to the next section. All right, so under B here, we have general, and obviously we've all had a chance to read this over. So for section B, any questions, comments, suggestions? Let you take a second to think about it.
So my only question is, I've looked at the previous, because there were people on the previous committee and who addressed these kind of terms of reference. Is there anything here that is particularly, doesn't seem very controversial? It would appear to be fairly generic and standard across all committees, I'm assuming. So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Vic.
I kind of forgotten about, I didn't spend a lot of time looking at the general part or the definitions when I was going through this, but what Jim brought up, I can't remember how it's addressed in that other version. But yeah, there some kind of guaranteeing some kind of continuity between the committee and the term of council would be good. And now it might be, the terms of members, it might be covered in that section, but I just think it's something we need to bear in mind. you know, if there's two extant members on the committee as council changes guaranteed, or if the term of the committee itself possibly goes a few months in. I'm not sure what the best way to deal with that is.
Denise, go ahead, please.
I think it's a really good point through you as the chair. So I'm just going to address it to you. But I think it's a really great point. However, it won't be the only committee that we have this issue where we have the regular things come back to it every month and we can't just skip a few months because we haven't got the committee appointed. The Committee of Adjustment is in the exact same situation. And we do reappoint fairly quickly right after the term. What I would suggest is, I think there may be a clause that could be added here, and I can go back and take a look at what we do for the Committee of Adjustment, which would allow for a buffer, but without necessarily extending it forever. So instead of saying 6 months necessarily, it would provide for that overlap should we still need to put out the postings and recruit and all of that, which we do, but would allow for a meeting to still happen in between. And if the committee is okay with this, I can go look and see what that were. I don't want to do it on the fly now, but pull that one up and we can compare and maybe add that as a little piece to it. So where it says the term of office shall be this, we could put a comma and maybe add an extra phrase, which would allow for the buffer. Because I know in that one, I think it allows for it to be extended slightly till we get the recruitment on, but the understanding is that it is going to be done, where this kind of says, yeah, you're over on January 31st. We just want to make sure that there's no, the committee's had a chance to get training and all these different things, depending on what kind of changeover there is. And we have that same issue with Committee of Adjustment, and they have files, like many files a month sometimes. So we sometimes have half a dozen monthly, rather than just like every once in a while we have a few. So we almost never skip a meeting on that one. So I think we're in the exact same boat with that committee.
Thank you for your comments, Denise. Jan, go ahead, please.
Question through the chair. Denise, this heritage is a mandated advisory committee. What is in the provincial mandate dealing with the term of reference? Is there anything?
So there isn't anything specific to say that you have to do one thing or another. So it doesn't say it shall end on this date or anything like that. The Committee of Adjustments is also a mandated committee. It's actually a quasi-judicial board, so it actually has decision-making powers. So it has to meet those regular schedules as well. And there is nothing in that act either, in the Planning Act, to say this is how the committee will be set up. We have the ability to do that based on our template and our kind of procedural bylaw generally. But I think that's where I'm suggesting, if we go look at how that other one is made up, I think it's in a similar position to Mr. Sullivan's point about keeping things going. We're in exact agreement with that. We don't want to see a pile of applications because we couldn't get the posting out quickly enough and get the committee restruck again after a council turnover, or after the council election. There may be no turnover after the council election. There is a couple of months to do that, but I can totally understand that some of these things, we don't always get these things done in a timely manner. So I do hear the question, which is, does this cover us? Should we need extra time? And I think I don't have that answer right now. And I think it's a great point. So what I can commit to is seeing if there's a way to create that overlap. I'm not sure it's 6 months, but I think we want to create some flexibility should we end up in that situation again. So it's not just immediately dissolved and we have nothing if we haven't got a new committee struck. Does that make sense? So I'll try to bring that back into the draft. So what I'm hearing is we want to give some flexibility for overlap should we need it.
Thank you.
I have two questions. As it stands now, there's two things that occurs to me. One is that, I'm a little unclear. This committee, does it immediately cease to be after an election occurs, or does it remain in place until a new committee is appointed? That's the first question.
Yes, so according to this terms of reference, it's this draft here. It says the term of office shall expire on January 31st, immediately following each regular municipal election.
Yeah,
so if the election is in October, council would be normally sworn in the November time period. So the assumption is there's still a couple of months and then this would end, like it would be 3 months or so.
Why wouldn't you just have it continue until council appoints a new committee? I mean, sorry, but like, if the council doesn't get around to it, this avoids the problem of not having a committee. That's the first thing. The second issue I wanted to raise was whether there's any provision here. We have a couple of people at least who have been on this committee before, which is a valuable resource because there's, you know, knowledge that they bring and experience they bring, and you're not starting from scratch like I am and some of our other committee members are. And is there anything, and do we want to take the approach that it should, and barring abnormal circumstances, there should be, I don't know, what if there should be a third of the committee or 25% of the committee should be renewed from the previous, you know, chosen from the previous committee, so that you have some continuity guarantee as opposed to relying upon the goodwill of the council to pick someone that, you know. So those are the 2 points I have. I don't understand why you cancel this committee simply because there's been an election. If there's supposed to be a new committee appointed, why don't we continue until the committee, and if the municipal government is mad about the committee and thinks they want to be changed, well, I guess that'll be a priority. They'll change them right away. But if they don't get around to it, it seems crazy that this committee is sort of stalled. You know, I don't understand why any of the committees are that way. Like, I don't understand this, not just this committee, but why do any of your committees break up that way? But anyway.
So I don't know if Alex would be a better person to answer some of this because I don't have, you know, specific information about all the committees, but it's my understanding that generally they follow the terms of council. So they do have a slight overlap because they restart, you know, for February 1st, where council starts when they're sworn in, which is a few months prior. So this is the way that it is set up, but I don't think there's any situation where we just didn't get around to starting the committees again. I think that we just keep going, we need to do it. So it's not really a council task where they are on their own trying to reappoint a new committee. Staff provides that support, the administrative support to putting those out, to making sure that they continue the business of the corporation. So it's the same thing with the committee of adjustment.
But what's the logic of having it end? That makes it even more silly, if you be honest with you, because if it's going to be a staff decision anyway, what is the logic of having it end at that period of time? If you want to say it will end, it should be as soon after the next regular municipal election as a new committee can be chosen. You know, instead of saying it just ends, you know, as of January 31st, just it'll end this, and maybe they'll do it sooner, maybe they'll take longer, but at least it guarantees that there's a committee in place all the time.
Understood. So I'm not suggesting that we do all the work and we just make the committee. I don't want to suggest that. It goes to council and council appoints people for sure.
This is not a criticism. It's only simply, it just seems to me that it would eliminate potential problems or a concern, because you have to have a committee in place, and you want to just say that shall expire as of immediately following as soon as it's replaced following each regular municipal election. Isn't that, I don't know, am I missing something? Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Jen. Thanks, Peter.
Mr. Chairman, do we need, I'm not totally clear on what we're doing in the workshop, whether we're actually making motions to bring forward ideas that the committee can vote on, or whether we're just discussing and staff's collecting all the ideas, or what. Should we be having a motion on Peter's point that can be put forward, you know, and then the group could vote to see if they're comfortable with that, and then it's a motion that would be internally held, perhaps, that staff would be aware of where all the group is on it? That's my question.
Sure. So Alex, what's the framework looking like that?
Like I said, we thought just to make things easier, we could kind of collect everything and then rework it and put it in another draft for everybody. But I'm not opposed to making a motion on every single proposed change either. It'll take a little bit longer, but if we'd rather take the approach of one person moves a motion to amend the terms of reference by blah, 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 and then we have a seconder and then we discuss and vote, I'm fine with that approach too. We can totally do that. I will comment just on Peter's comments about the term resetting. I will have to take another look at the Municipal Elections Act, because I think that's where the 4-year term comes from, because the idea is that when the new council comes in, they are looking at their advisory committees and they might rejig them or that kind of thing. In a more practical sense, I would have to look at the actual legislation. I will say though, just like we've been talking about, the current terms of reference for this committee was adopted in 2019, and it has carried into, you know, the next term of council, and we are just now getting to it more than halfway into this term of council. So in a practical sense, you're like, that does happen because we did have applications come in, and Councillor Forder can comment on this, but when the new council came in, they wanted to establish the council priorities first before, because then the advisory committees lined up with the priorities. So that's why we did sort of that exercise where these committees were just established earlier this year, as opposed to the first year that council was sworn in. So it was a little bit different this term, I think that's been done in prior terms. But we do, because the terms of reference is enacted and adopted by bylaw, that bylaw stays in force until the next terms of reference is adopted, and then that bylaw repeals the previous bylaw. So we kind of carried through with the previously adopted appointment bylaw, which appointed the last committee and the last terms of reference, if that makes sense.
No, not really.
Okay.
Well, I guess
That's
the
okay.
only comment I'd make to Janice's point is that I feel, to be fair to the staff, we're raising things that they haven't necessarily planned to address today. And they may well have logical reasons that, you know, because they didn't come here prepared to answer that today. It seems to me that rather than have us vote and say that's what we want, if it turns out we can't have it because maybe there is some legislative right that prevents this, but it would seem odd to me. But I guess it's for going forward, if the staff can look and say that there appears to be an interest in considering whether the committee can continue to remain in place until a new one is appointed. And then the second thing which I raised was this idea of whether there should be some, rather than a wholesale transfer of the committee potentially. I realize that doesn't necessarily happen every time, but it potentially could happen. That is it desirous to explicitly state that there should be some members carried forward, you know, for another term. Sorry.
And I just to jump in, I believe there is a guide for how the committees are chosen. So I think we actually have to follow a different set of criteria for advisory committees as well. So I think there's another document that we do so they come, and it has to do with, if you've been on it for 2 terms, then usually you don't have as much priority as somebody else, but that there is wish to have continuity, to have a variety of voices and all of those kinds of things. So I believe there is that, I've seen it and I just don't have it in front of me now, that guides how people are chosen.
But I'm assuming that's suggestive rather than determinative.
So it's not from what I remember last time that I've looked at it, it was a set of criteria for which to provide information to council. You know, these people are eligible, these people, you know, for example, if you live in the municipality, your own property or whatever the criteria are, and then there's a bunch of other criteria. And then when we put forward information to council, those things are used. So so that you're not using the same 4 people on every committee for the rest of it. So I think there's because we don't want only 4 people on 6 advisory committees or something like that, right? So I think that those things are all part of the selection process that council uses.
Thank you, Denise. And I just want to make a comment that after today's workshop, this is not a finalized document. We will be able to review this again at the next Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. And then council will also have an opportunity to review it at when this is presented to council as well for final approval. So we still have a few stages we can go to tweak this. So I think one of the best formats is continuing to provide suggestions to staff. So when the updated document is presented at our next Heritage meeting, that feedback is going to be incorporated. But if there is something that a member is very specific with regards to making a change, then you could put forward a motion, and then we can discuss that at that time. So I think what we might be able to do is have a little bit of a blend depending on what these suggestions and at what different stage of the terms of reference we're at. So we'll just continue doing it like that. But I know Jan had something to say. Please go ahead.
Just to keep it simple and going forward into a conclusion of something, I'm wondering if through the chair, Mr. Chairman, if you could just maybe ask each member how they feel about Peter's suggestion, and that would give staff a clear definition that the committee themselves feel it is a strong point, because we've got so many points.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you, Jan. Okay, so I'll just leave it to the horseshoe here. So with regards to Peter's comments, does anybody have any feedback on any of that? Yeah, Vicky liking it? Okay.
I think I'd rather wait till, I think it's Alex who's gonna find out whether or not it's a moot point or not.
Mhm.
And see if it is, because the document that was also part of our agenda today on the second page here, I mean, it's just a very simple statement. Item number 3, term. The Heritage Committee's term will be concurrent with the term of council. So there's no explanation as to how that decision came to be. And if in fact, it's something that can't be changed. Once we know that, then we can move forward. That's my feeling.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. Everybody good with this part so far? Okay, wonderful. So that covers, we were on general, that was B. Now we're on to C, which is definitions. Pretty standard stuff, but is there any feedback or comments with regards to section C definitions? Go ahead, Alex, thank you.
I'll make a comment because I just wanted to circle back to what some of you were saying regarding the education to the public piece. I just want to highlight pieces in our agenda that already exist, no changes need to be made, and are available to the public. So I saw a presentation in the definitions and it just reminded me, every regular scheduled heritage meeting, we have the public participation section. I think I would love to see with more of the advisory committees, members from the public coming to make presentations to the committee. Obviously, we often have applicants come because they know that their application is being seen by the committee, so they're coming to talk about it. But I think something that would be great to explore is how we can promote our public participation section of our committee meetings to the public so that we do get even more public engagement. This committee is already a forum for public engagement because you folks are all members of the public, of course. But I do want to just sort of put that bug in your ear and just know that we do have that piece on every single agenda. I more or less just wanted to kind of highlight that.
Thank you, Alex, for that. Appreciate that. Okay, so definitions all pretty straightforward. I think we're okay with all of that. Section D, mandate. Thoughts, comments? Vic, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is where I think we need to get a little more explicit. Toolkit guidelines and the sample Chatham-Kent all have a lot of detail. In addition to being minimal, this pretty much restricts our role to reviewing applications. And in fact, it restricts it to the Heritage Conservation District pretty much, since that's where the applications are coming from. Like the best suggestion I can make here is to turn to Jim's version and let's include all that unless there's specific objections to any particular point. Again, this is largely based on the Chatham-Kent terms, which are cited in both the older Heritage Toolkit province put out and the newer draft, which hasn't yet been adopted. So, you know, they have a history. That's my thoughts.
Don't forget your microphone, Peter.
Sorry, Vic, when you say include all of it, which part are you
Basically,
thinking
the
of?
mandate, there's this
Oh, the whole mandate section,
statutory
okay.
1.1 statutory role, including 1.2 non-statutory role.
So all the way down to organization of the committee.
Yeah,
on that,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, I saw this earlier. I agreed with everything at an earlier point. I have not read through everything in the last couple days since the agenda, but you know, these are all good points, and as I say, they're based on precedent Chatham-Kent. I think that the draft version is way too restrictive and sticks us in the Heritage Conservation District as well, which
Well, sorry, though, if I look at the the statutory role, is that covered by the wording, by the brief wording that is in the current draft? Do you see what I'm saying?
Not under mandate, it just says we'll review applications.
Right. Well, I guess so what would you, I just wonder if there's another way of saying that. Well, you guess, yes, I agree. It does not include any of those other things.
And again, it's something for us to refer to, it's something for the public to refer to, it's, like, you know, just my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Vic. Please go ahead, Jen.
Peter, there's the Ontario Heritage Act provides a framework. I don't know if you're looking at that page. Under the Act, council is empowered to add all these activities.
Right.
So that is really important. It is under the Act and it's already there. It gives us the authority to expand ourselves so that we can use heritage for many reasons. We can use it as a financial resource. We can use it for education. You can use it for so many things. So maybe there needs to be a reference in the mandate, the D section that we're in, to refer back to the Ontario Heritage Act. So this is all there and we can look up, and if there's something we choose to do, it can be done.
Is there any reason why the staff chose to keep it as abbreviated as they did?
I think we left it in there because we knew we'd be working on this.
Okay.
And that is what we were very clear that this committee's mandate is reviewing applications. So we can talk about it for sure.
Right. In
Yeah.
other words, there's no official staff position that it would be wrong to add these or that it would be inaccurate to add them.
I wouldn't say wrong. I would say we can have that discussion. I would just note that it is important to sort of reiterate that the committee acts based on council direction, right? So I think to make sure that each committee is doing valuable work and everyone's being heard, and sort of the motions that you pass and the recommendations you make are going to council, they're being put into motion. We don't want to get too, your mandate's 15, 20 things long, but the reality is we actually can't have you doing any of those things without the direction from council to go ahead and do them. And we are working on that channel where, for example, if one of you wants to work on a specific project, well, we'll pass a motion at the committee and then maybe Brandon can talk about it at the next council meeting. And then it ultimately has to be passed by council as a decision for the committee to then be able to actually go ahead and work on it. Applications are already, this is something that is guided by legislation and the committee gets to see the applications regardless. And then your decision goes directly into a report right to council. So your discussion and your recommendation is quite literally seen by council and makes a quite literal impact on council's decision. So I think that's why it's important to have that piece in the mandate, and try to be, I think we should be as specific as we can be, and recognizing that we can't go ahead and do things without council's direction.
What is the risk of making it longer, like with more detail?
I don't think there's a risk. I more or less just wanted to reiterate, I don't want there to be a long mandate and then it becomes a frustration piece where we have this long mandate and we're not getting things done and we don't feel like we're moving the needle on these items. But the reality is we have other channels that we have to go through in order to have the committee actually do the work that they want to do. So it's kind of like, what can we realistically accomplish?
But is there a compromise in not having it quite so brief, but maybe have like the statutory role and also the non-statutory role without the subsections?
Mhm.
And it just seems like it's extremely limited.
Yeah.
And it seems to encourage council to view that that's all this committee is for review, even if it's aspirational.
Just don't forget your microphone though, Peter.
Even if it's aspirational to have some of those things listed, that we don't have that power now. So that it's, at least they're aware.
I know Denise was in the queue to speak. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, there was always a bit of a non-statutory role included and it wasn't very specific before. And I think what we just want to be careful of, and so staff don't have a position on how much of a non-statutory role the committee wants to seek. What we we want to just be careful that we're not doing projects that don't end up being supported. And I can tell a bit of an anecdote from the committee, and Jim will remember this, I'm sure. But we were previously supported in going to create a heritage list. So for the register, and we went, and I'm talking, we workshopped this. So we actually broke up into groups. People had, when we walked all over town, people went in the country. We created a big register with whether or not something met heritage and it should be considered. We obviously, the point of listing properties is we don't have to do a big undertaking to research to prove that those are heritage. It just gives you that gut check. It looks like it's heritage. We believe it is at first glance. And then what that did was it just prevented, if it's on that heritage register is listed, it prevented a demolition without council being aware of it. So it just gave a 60-day notice period. If we do want to go and do research and come up with, I say we as a community, we want to go do research and make sure that a property is designated that should be, it gave us that second check, a second ability to do that because we would have notice of a demolition. So we did that project. We spent a lot of time on it, and there were probably hundreds of properties on the potential list. And then eventually that list just kind of got scrapped. So all of the hard work, and we didn't just do it within the committee, we actually did some outreach, and there were other folks that helped do those, I'll call them window, we used to call those windshield surveys, where we went around, and I walked the streets and filled out forms up and down different streets. We all took a section to do a kind of a pilot. I wouldn't want us to go, there's a lot of frustration in that when the committee members, volunteers spend so much time. And we actually had a workshop on how to fill that out with people who were going to volunteer and help us with that. And then that whole project kind of didn't move forward, whether it ended up becoming too onerous or it was too much and council didn't want to go that direction. We didn't have council direction to continue to do that project in the first place. And what ended up happening was we all wasted our time. And I think that's a frustrating position to be in when we find that out after. So I think for things like if we have a mandate that includes some non-statutory things, I think if we say, hey, we'd like to do a plaque program, that we want something like that in there. And it could be things like recognition of other heritage, small H heritage attributes where a property is not designated, but they should be recognized as a century home or something. If those are the kinds of things that the committee thinks are important, we don't want to go down a certain pipe and then find out council doesn't want to give resources to that, doesn't want us to continue. So I think if we do decide we want to do a program like that, that we seek council's approval before we continue on with it. And it's something that kind of fields up like, hey, recommendation from the Heritage Committee to do a plaque program, and some information gets provided to council and council makes a decision, kind of says, go ahead and do that. And then the committee comes back to a meeting and starts doing that work. Those are the kinds of ways I thought that the non-statutory could work. And that way we don't end up throwing away people's time, valuable time, on something that didn't end up getting passed or supported as a project. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Denise. Sure. So Alex, what's the protocol if we have a member of the public that wants to make a comment?
We don't usually take public comments in our meeting setting, but I'll let you make that call.
Okay. Jim, were you looking to make a comment?
Yeah, I agree with everything.
Yes. Yeah, we'll just give you a minute. Jim, go ahead.
I agree with everything that Denise said.
I'm sorry, Jim. Yeah, just the button there, the gray button says talk there. Okay,
Thanks.
go ahead, sir.
I agree with everything Denise said, and that is the reason you need to have as much in in your terms of reference, because that wasn't in the terms of reference, so it had to go through council. Anything you put in that terms of reference gets passed into a bylaw. That bylaw is what you can do. It doesn't have to go through council, although I would recommend it if I was on the committee. I'm just going to bring up that point that if it's not in the terms of reference, it will have to go through council. There's things on the terms of reference that the 4 people put together in the last term that you may or may not want to do. But as I said, if they aren't in there, then you'll have to go through council and it may never get to council. Thank you. Sorry, Denise.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate your comments. Alex, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, that's incorrect. The committee cannot act without council direction. The same thing goes for staff. We're limited in what we can do without council direction versus what we can do. The terms of reference is a sort of a guiding document, and it's adopted as a piece. The bylaw is actually to establish the Heritage Advisory Committee, and the terms of reference is a schedule to that establishment. So our advisory committees cannot act independently of council. Council needs to give that direction, and then that's how we can move forward with what we do.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I think Vic was first. Please go ahead, Vic.
If that's the case, then could the non-statutory area be covered by something like the committee may with direction from council as required, blah, blah, blah?
Yes, and actually that's exactly what I was going to suggest. Why don't we put some wording in there that captures the non-statutory piece as per the direction from council? And I think obviously this committee is focused on heritage, so a lot of you folks will have great ideas that council might need to hear about. They might not have those same ideas, but I think it doesn't have to be so clearly and specifically defined in the terms of reference, but we can kind of come up with a way through the chair and in our open meetings where we think about how we present our ideas to council so that they can hear them, consider them, and then actually allow us to act on them. So I think if we did include a piece like that, I think that would be a good decision.
Thank you, Alex. Vic, continue, please.
I'm not sure if you're saying that then we wouldn't have all these specifics, but I think, again, coming back to a reference for us as a committee and to the public and to council, having all these specifics, I think, is worthwhile, especially if it's prefaced with something that covers what we're working under.
Do you want to give, actually, to that point, do you want to give an example? Because I wonder if we're talking about maybe like a work plan situation versus the terms of reference document. Because I think if we're speaking about an idea, that might be presented to council in a different way versus through the terms of reference. So maybe if you have an example, we can maybe work through that.
Just don't forget your microphone, Vic. Thank you.
The easiest would probably be education and promotion. Just it's giving some examples. So it's guiding us as to, we could potentially should be doing these things as long as it's okay with council.
I think that might cover if we say non-statutory roles, that like, just so we stay a little bit more broad. Otherwise, if we're listing off our ideas and things we'd like to do, I just don't know that the terms of reference would be the best place for that versus coming up with our idea in an open meeting and then bringing it to council by way of staff report, or Brandon's bringing it in his verbal report. So I don't know that specific ideas, the terms of reference would be best for that.
I would defer to you, except Chatham-Kent's example in the Ontario Heritage Toolkit does include that stuff. So I don't know why they might have done it and why the provincial government at the time considered it a good example, but.
Sorry, I'm not understanding. They made a toolkit, Chatham-Kent, you said, or
this
they?
is in their terms of reference. They have
Yeah.
non-statutory role, resource-based, education, promotion, development of the official plan, advice, inform council. I think many of the things are almost word for word with some nuances in this version. So
Yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with it, I guess. And I'm not sure what would be wrong with it.
I wasn't saying anything was
okay.
wrong with it. I was just saying, like, if we're talking about a specific idea, I don't know that specific idea that you guys would actually that you want to go ahead and execute makes sense to put it in the terms of reference. Because right now we're talking about the overall mandate, right? So maybe non-statutory duties such as education, promotion, examples like that, as per the direction from like something like that, I think makes sense. Because again, it's still kind of broad.
Thank you. So I just want to kindly remind the committee here that if you wish to speak, just raise your hand and the chair will give you the floor to speak. Okay. Jan has been waiting for a moment. I'll let you go ahead, and I've got everybody else in the queue.
2 workshops ago, it was brought out, we were stuck in COVID. We were stuck with a Ford government that took heritage and put it under a different labeling. It just made things more difficult. And 2 workshops ago, they changed where, say, one of the churches has absolutely gorgeous windows in town, and those windows need to be protected. Not that they wouldn't be. I'm not saying there's any chance there's a problem. I'm just saying things like that needed to go in on a list where the Ford government changed the way that we could keep that list, that they could be on it, but it had to be worked at in a time frame which maybe wasn't suitable. So you're working with so many different levels. You have to fit in with all the everything from Grey County, province, everything, and bylaws that the local municipality has. I caution, my thinking is not that if this committee feels there is something that is urgent, in jeopardy, that is important to the community, that they should still, I believe, be able to set up a work committee of 2 or 3 people that would look at that topic. I don't believe they have to go to council and ask if they can research that topic to see if there's any need for council to think about it. Council has a huge, huge job taking care of all services and all finances, and heritage is one of the items in there. I believe that we were formed to advise and protect and come up with good, solid research that council then can look at and make serious decisions on. And we are the link to the public. So I'm agreeing with Vic that there needs to be a flexibility written in that allows us to go in directions that the public, for some reason, or if there's some issue comes up that needs to be looked at. The last committee went through COVID. Believe me, that was not a lot of fun to try and function. We had, example, one heritage property asked to be designated by the owner. My goodness, it took nearly 2 years because of limitations. So I agree with Vic, there needs to be some in there. I think we need to request staff allow us the flexibility. If we have an idea, you don't run to council and take their time, in my mind, to be able to research that idea to see if it's feasible. We come up with a conclusion that council can look at. That's why we are worth dollars and cents as volunteers, because we're not taking taxpayers' money to come up with things that need to be researched. So.
I was just going to say, the only thing I could imagine, and I'm not necessarily defending it, is that if we do something, I don't think, I agree, I guess we can do whatever we want. To some extent, it doesn't involve council's resources or council's money. If it involves staff time, that would be another issue. Right, that is money, though it is, that's what I'm saying. And I can understand council taking a view about that. What I was going to say, my point about this mandate issue is, I look at this long list in the Chatham example. It lists all these things that the Heritage Council Committee can do, which I'm presuming are set out in the Ontario Heritage Act. So if, for example, the mandate said that the Heritage Advisory Committee shall perform all the functions provided to a Heritage Advisory Committee under the Ontario Heritage Act, including, without limiting the generality that we're going, the reviewing of applications. Because there's clearly a bunch of other things that the Act envisages these committees doing, which are not listed there. And I could certainly understand why a council member would go, wait a minute, why are these guys doing this? it's not listed. All they're supposed to do is review applications, and they would be right to say that, the way it is drafted now.
Denise, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, I'm hearing loud and clear that there's a non-statutory role of the committee desired, and I don't think that that's a surprise to any of us at staff. It's just, I think so just to clarify, based on the previous point the member made, the statutory role is the part that's laid out in the act. The non-statutory is the part that's not laid out specifically to say the committee will do this or can do this. And those are still things that you can do. And if we remember from our training with Bert, his recommendation was just don't forget your statutory role and spend all your time on the non-statutory, which is fair. My question might be, what I jotted down and what I gleaned from Mr. Sullivan's version as well, that there was sort of that education and promotion, like the buckets, I'll call them, education and promotion piece. So that's sort of just without getting specific about what education and promotion could be, is the committee okay with keeping us within sort of types versus like the types of things without saying it will be, you'll create a list, or if you will, make a new website, like without getting into those specifics? Is it fair to say, I heard education promotion and community outreach? Those would be things that are kind of related. Research, these would be if somebody, and certainly the committee did a lot of that work in the past anyways. For example, to the members' comment about the Bayview property, the majority of the work to create that designation was done by the committee members, not by staff. And so without the committee members doing that work, probably wouldn't even have what we have now, which is the designation. So the research was done by the committee members. So that non-statutory role has always existed. So that's my point. And then the other thing that I heard reading through what Mr. Sullivan's version has and some of the other ones we've seen, there's the committee would like to have the ability to comment on and provide feedback on things that are corporate. So for example, if we're updating the Heritage Conservation District plan, creating any new heritage plans, heritage policies or other policies within the official plan, updates to the zoning bylaw, things like that. And I think that those were the general buckets, but there could be others. And it could be also things like when the committee provided some very significant feedback to the property standards bylaw when it got redone. That's another perfect example that the committee did. So that's the non-statutory, but the expertise of the committee helped frame and push that ball forward so that we have that more robust property standards bylaw. So could we put that last bucket then, feedback on corporate initiatives, including things such as, and we just give a list of a few, and they could be the ones listed in Mr. Sullivan's, but just not as specific. So we could shorten it down, like things like the official plan update, zoning bylaw amendment updates. Because I would myself, if I were bringing an update to the zoning bylaw, I'd be taking it to all the committees and saying, here's what we're planning to do. This committee would be included, but I would also take it to like the other advisory committees because they have feedback too. So that would be something we would do, but just to make sure it's clear that that is what types of things the committee would want. Are those the buckets you generally see? Or are there any I've missed?
Sorry, well, you've gone on to the non-statutory, and I made the point that it seems to me arguably that description in the mandate does not include all the statutory, the way I read it at least, it may not include all the statutory things that the committee can do.
So, Mr. Chair, if what I'm hearing is that the committee would prefer that the statutory activities are fleshed out, we can do that in the update. So we can just list them and then they're just clear.
You could do that, or you could simply say that the Heritage Advisory Committee shall perform all the functions available to a Heritage Advisory Committee under the Ontario Heritage Act, including, including but not limited to reviewing of applications. I don't know whether you have to list it all. You could list it all if you prefer it. But I mean, the other thing is the act can change too, right? And if you have a description, a wording the way I've described, you avoid any need to, you know, and I would say the Ontario Heritage Act 1990 as amended, assuming because they've always been amended, right? You should put that in there because there've been amendments and you want to make sure it includes that. But that avoids having to address this issue again if there are changes. And I mean, why wouldn't we be able to do whatever the act allows us to do? That's all we're agreeing with, right? I mean, there's no controversy about that. I wouldn't have thought. And yes, you could arguably put them all in, but then that gets to be a long list and you may need to change it over time. Anyway, just a thought.
Great comment, Peter. Thank you. Simon, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
I think most of my comments have been covered by others. And just to clarify, this is a public facing document as well. So members of the public will look at this wondering what we do and use it as advice. And yeah, that basically that covers it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other oh, sorry, Denise, go ahead.
So I can totally appreciate the comment that, just to clarify the first part of the mandate, which is the statutory. I think I still didn't hear the feedback on the non-statutory. Were those the buckets that people felt comfortable with, or was there any missed? Because I think I've got 4. So I had education and promotion, which I also had as community outreach. And then research, which I wanted to just flesh out a little bit to say research such as like on heritage attributes, properties for, you know, I don't know what, if you want to say something more about research, but that's the general bucket. The example was for what the committee did to back up the request for a designation of someone's property, provide feedback on corporate initiatives and documents like the official plan. If we were doing a strategic plan, for example, Heritage Conservation District update, those sorts of things, which we could list as examples.
Are you suggesting, for example, you would say that the committee's work may include non-statutory duties, including but not limited to the following, something like that?
That's correct.
Satisfied with that, guys? Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. So last chance, any other comments with regards to section D, the mandate? No, I think we've covered that. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So let's move on to section E for meetings. Any comments or suggestions on this section? I'll give you a moment to look it over. Vic, yes, sir. Go ahead. Don't forget your mic. Don't forget your microphone, please.
Regarding frequency, I think the only thing is we should be including the idea of that they're scheduled ahead of time, like at the beginning of the year. This way, the public, when they're coming to make an application, they know at the very latest it's going to be heard at this meeting. Possibly there could be an additional meeting prior to that. My comment on quorum, it's kind of covered in the definitions, but this wording is pretty strange because it would mean that 4 is not a quorum, because that wouldn't be 50% plus 1 if there were 7 people. So I think the wording up above is majority. Both the number 3 and 4, I love those concepts that are new, particularly the agenda meeting, pre-agenda meeting, and the fact that we will see minutes within a week after the meeting. Those are both great additions, I think. So I guess the main thing there is just the frequency being scheduled, or meetings being scheduled is the addition I would like to see in there.
I wonder whether there would be, when it comes to meetings, whether there would be, you're talking about predictability for the public and you want to encourage participation. And I wonder whether it would be better to have something like the meeting will take place on the first Tuesday or the first Wednesday of the month. unless that falls on a holiday or something, just with the idea that it's predictable. And I don't know whether you would want to do one. You could have one once a month with it being canceled if it's not needed or something like that. But if you had a predictable date, and that would also allow board members to plan their schedules ahead of time as much as possible, because you do book some things like a year ahead, right? So I don't know whether other committees do that, whether the staff have had experience with that, whether that works or doesn't work.
Alex, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So we have 9 advisory committees, and I am the only person in legislative services right now. I had the luxury of making the committee schedule for this year, and it was tough because we had to have them on Wednesdays, and we only have so many Wednesdays in the year. Plus, we're working with Committee of Adjustments and the Library Board. They also need to use the council chambers. I think next year, I'm not opposed to looking at meetings on Mondays or a different day instead of Wednesdays. Don't quote me on that because I need to look into there's a lot of moving pieces. There's several committee member schedules, there's staff schedules, there's the space, there's the IT schedule. So I think if we could please try to avoid being very specific about first Monday of every month, or if we could stay away from that, I would appreciate just sort of a little bit of patience with that, because it is a big task for 9 advisory committees and council meetings.
Well, it may not work. It may not work, and clearly you thought about that, and perhaps it's not feasible. But if it could, it'd be nice. But if it can't, it can't.
That's a good suggestion, Peter. Thanks for your comments, Alex. Nancy, go ahead, please.
Is the number of meetings reliant on your availability? As you say, you have so many advisory boards. I'm just wondering how the number of 6 was arrived at.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's not based on just me. No, I'm not that special. But the 6 times per year, I think the idea was every other month for all of our committees, other than Committee of Adjustments and Library Board. They kind of run on their own schedule. But just to be consistent with the schedule and to ensure that there is enough staff support for all of those meetings, I think we wanted to be, like I said, on a more consistent schedule, and every other month was kind of the goal. And then even that's not sometimes super doable, because even when I did the schedule, the committees were established, I think in April or May. So I didn't even have the full year to work with. So I think the Heritage Committee, we had 5 regular meetings for the rest of the year, plus this one is an extra. And then the other ones, I think I was able to squeeze in 4. So it's what we aim for. We'll say that.
Thank you. Is there a question over here? Simon, go ahead.
My question would be timing of meetings. I'm lucky that my job allows some flexibility for me to be here at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. However, other people that are still in the workforce may not have that flexibility. And as such, we might exclude certain members of the community from volunteering in the future. Is there a possibility of moving some meetings, understanding that obviously staff have a schedule with the municipality, to perhaps do a 4 p.m., 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. meeting rather than in the middle of the day?
Comment, Alex? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Good point. And this was considered at council's meeting where they passed the motion to establish all of the committees. So we were discussing times. We had a discussion. We were thinking about 9 o'clock. We were thinking about evening. We considered a bunch of different times, but this ultimately did come from council's decision to have them scheduled at 2 o'clock. We also wanted to, historically we had committee meetings scheduled at 3, but we bumped it up to 2 because we wanted to make sure folks could take our Meaford Moves specialized transit just within those hours to our committee meetings. So that was a consideration we had as well. I think the time that we hold our meetings would be a little bit of a bigger thing to look at, because I think that would be something that council would have to ultimately look at. And I'm not saying it's impossible, maybe in the future.
And I do remember we had a pretty fulsome discussion at council when we were evaluating which times would be most suitable. particularly the Pump Storage Advisory Committee as well. But that was a council decision, and if we just decide to change that, that'll also have to be a council decision as well. Any other comments, Vic? Please go ahead.
I actually did forget one because I had this organized with the draft version in front and then Jim's version. Under meetings on Jim's version, the fourth bullet is agendas and information packages will be delivered to committee members 2 weeks prior to the next meeting. And I would really like to see this. I don't know how possible it is. As a committee, we're volunteers, we're not paid to, and you know, we could be slogging through, you know, a couple hundred pages as we have in the past. Like unless there's some legal reason we can't see the agenda and full information sooner than 1 week prior, a week is often very limited. Last time there was a holiday Monday in there, and you know, it's often not enough time to review the material depending on the complexity of the application.
Nice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. The agenda publication comes from our procedural bylaw. So that's where that week timeline comes from. I think in the future, we can look at a proposal to council about a few different things we'd like to change in that bylaw. It's a bigger project than just simply doing it for just this committee. So I will say that.
Peter, yes, sir.
Sorry, one thing, in terms of agendas and documents we receive, I note that the public gets 5 minutes to talk. It would be helpful, and I don't know whether it always does get included because I'm relatively new to the committee. I apologize if this is a foolish question, but if the public has written materials, for example, like this particular stuff I would like to see included with the agenda bundle, as it were.
Yes, Alex, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have on every agenda, other than this one, because it was the terms of reference workshop, we have the communication section. So you'll see even on the last meeting, we had the communication section, and there's actually a deadline on there for the correspondence to be submitted to me, because I have to compile the list, put it on the agenda, and then not only does the committee have access to it, but the public does as well. It's the same thing for council. We do a correspondence index so that the public can see what has gone to council. So as long as I receive things well in advance, I'm more than happy to include them. But it does take I need to receive it before the agenda goes out. Otherwise, it'll go onto the next meeting agenda.
Understood, but should there be a reference to that in the materials to be provided?
I don't think so, because our procedural bylaw covers that.
Thank you, Alex. How's everybody else feeling so far with regards to this section? Any other comments, guys?
Vic's comment about the quorum being 50% should be about that 50% issue. Just the majority, should be a majority of the appointed members, including at least one appointed member. Because of the rather odd math, as it's pointed out.
Just don't forget your microphone if you're speaking there, Vic. Thank you.
Quorum's defined, so I'm not even sure it's necessary to have that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, again, wording comes from our procedural bylaw. So I can look into sort of the math behind that, and we'll bring it up at the next meeting. Again, it's just our standard wording that we took right from the bylaw.
Great. Thank you for that, Alex. Okay. So with meetings, I think we have lots of feedback and suggestions. That's wonderful. So why don't we move on to section F, which is administration. And Jan, please kick it off.
Mr. Chairman, I'm on the agenda to speak, and my topic is number 2 on the administration here that we're working through. I'm wondering if the committee may allow me to make my presentation now within the administration and save that time. Like, it would just be repetitive, and we've got a lot of points, and I can make my request to you under this and then eliminate that section where my name is on the agenda. I'm just looking for direction on that, please.
Thanks, Jan. I'm okay with that as long as I'm not breaking any rules. Yeah, okay, sure, I'll allow it. Go ahead, Jan.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to make it really simple. Could you give one of these to Denise, please? This will just make it a little bit simpler.
This is a separate one here. Yep, thank you. Floor is yours, Jan, go ahead.
I just handed out an outline of what I'm going to request from the committee members. Basically, I'm asking if we can, this doesn't have to be a motion now. If you're not comfortable, I know this might be new in a lot of areas. And if it's not a motion now, it could be a motion at the next meeting if you wish to delay. And basically what I'm asking is that the Heritage Advisory Committee requests council to modify bylaw 2021-77, section 8.1, which states all meetings must be open to the public, thus requiring a formal agenda format to include wording which will allow volunteers specific to an advisory committee to gather information, to gather informally, to discuss research and process information. Information, ideas, and suggestion from such an informal gathering would be brought to a scheduled formal public meeting of that specific advisory committee for consideration. That's what I am requesting the members to consider. Under that, for efficiency and fairness, the terms of reference should be the same for all municipal volunteer advisory committees. We are all volunteers. We are all subject to the rules of council. Municipal government is a four-way partnership between elected councillors, salaried employees, volunteer citizens, and the community who are the taxpayers. To function effectively, there must be a balance between authority, responsibility, research, and financial resource. Volunteers are a financial resource for the municipality. They're the direct link to the community, and in some instances can erase the need for a costly consultant's report. Volunteers have individual expertise plus personal networks within the community. They are the link that allows the positive flow of ideas from governing to the people and from the people to the governors. Heritage volunteers, they are valuable in actual dollars and cents by not requiring costly consultants for many arrangements with local and landowners. This results in a budgeting surplus for involved planning, such as was presented by consultants NPG Planning Solutions, outlining the challenges and the opportunities regarding the downtown Meaford Heritage Conservation District Plan. That is a good value for the taxpayers' money because it gives a sensible, clear plan on how to move forward in a longer term. Volunteers donate time and skills because we all believe in the same general cause. We're all here because we believe in heritage. In addition, we commit because each of us also has some personal goal or motivation that we're looking for. We believe in the general heritage, but we all have specifics that we feel are really important to the general population, to the municipality, and we need to have that valued when we are volunteering our time and finances. And sadly, with people who have to skip work, it can be quite a commitment. As noted in the recent training sessions, I believe you had one with Bert Close of Human Heritage Services, and he's saying advisory committees are to provide knowledge and expertise. Their benefits are to harness local talent and expertise, which we all come from different backgrounds and we all have different strengths that are on this committee. We are also to build relationships with and recognize the efforts of the heritage property owners. We don't own these properties. The municipality has received them through history as such a benefit and financial benefit, not just a routing and heritage benefit. So it identifies who and what the people who live in this community are. Their responsibilities are to survey inventory, which Denise was speaking about listings, to research and to act as a community involvement and liaison. And that was gone through for you with your bylaw, which sorry I missed, but it was done really well there. The other thing that we have is advisory committees are required to function in a regulated framework set out by provincial laws, Grey County official plan, municipal bylaws, landowners' rights, and community vision. So we do not have just ideas we can pull out and put out there. We are terribly regulated on everything we do. Now, this means for all volunteer advisory committees, not just heritage. Volunteers must consider compliance with provincial mandates. They must conform to Grey County official plan, and they must support and promote the municipality of Meaford's official plan. In addition, heritage volunteers must also follow the Downtown Heritage Conservation District Plan. They must be aware and sympathetic to the ownership of subject property and affect any decision on council that could have, and affect any decision on advice to council that could have any neighbors and the community involved and will affect them from their real estate value, from their living, from their lifestyles, everything. Things that go to council, that we present to council as a suggestion, must be thoroughly researched because there are far too many, there's far too many individuals involved in the heritage part of the advisory committees. Municipal staff has the responsibility to regulate the effectiveness and efficient operation of advisory committees and to ensure transparency. That is in bylaws that council has already put in place. Excuse me. Volunteers have the responsibility to provide counselors with well-researched advice that will benefit the community. This is a partnership and it requires mutual respect and recognition between all parties involved. That is your council, your staff, your volunteers, and your landowner taxpayers that we have. Respectfully, I suggest the past term of reference forbid volunteers to discuss ideas if more than half of the committee met without having an agenda and minutes as established in bylaw 2021-77 part 5. The minutes section of 39.1 requires minutes to be recorded referring to all 8 sections. It is tedious. Transparency is essential. We are here as advisors. Council is here. Paid employment is here. Everything is here based on the taxpayers and what they are putting forward to support services and the municipal activities. Modifying bylaw 2021-77 section 8.1 would allow for sound, well-researched advice and still ensure transparency at the subsequent formal public meeting. Nothing would come from an informal gathering of our committee that would not go to a formal, transparent public meeting and then go as a suggestion to council. But it would have more research and more ways. We all have our own networks. We all have our own experience. And it would just make a more solid suggestion to counselors who are depending on us and staff as part of the partnership to put forward ideas that provide solid services and not put council in a situation of litigation. It happens and it needs to be avoided. With regard to heritage, it would provide a safeguard to planning the protection of treasures that history's given to the municipality of the town of Meaford, St. Vincent, and Sydenham Township. It's not just the downtown heritage, which is very important, that district, but it is also, you have 2 townships with some amazing heritage resources that could be used financially for tourism. And well, it's just unlimited what you could do with it. I'm just requesting that the committee members consider modifying this bylaw so that we can meet. And just to put it in general terms, which will sound a little silly, I really don't know 4 of the new members very well. We've just met. I know your names, right? I know we have in common the commitment and the interest in heritage. And we also have a commitment and interest in finances, because that's what the base, what we can take anything. So say I want to get to know you. I invite you to my home for lunch. So all the committee members come for lunch. Because heritage is our general bonding, really, we don't know anything about ourselves other than that, we would talk about heritage. According to the way the bylaw is set up right now in that section 5, I have to have an agenda. I have to produce minutes, all 8 sections of what is required in minutes, and I have to do this or I'm in violation of the bylaw. Now, there is another option. If we wanted to be a bit subversive, sorry, which, see, the word won't come out because we aren't going there. But I could say, okay, we can meet. We have a choice. Less than a quorum can meet. You can come for lunch. The next time I can have the other half of the quorum that didn't come for the first lunch can come to the second lunch. And then maybe we can combine whatever. It's tedious. And we're not children, we're adults. Nobody is trying to keep anything from counselors or anything from the staff. We're just trying to research and come up with solid ideas. Transparency, absolutely. The public would know all the ideas and everything that came out of these meetings. But I believe this, the way this section reads right now, it is a little restrictive and it doesn't allow people to actually promote and research. So I'm just asking the members, and I'd love feedback on this, please, just to modify, still allow framework. Staff must control us. They're paid to do that. We can't go off in all kinds of crazy tangents. We're working in a partnership to come up with good research. So what counselors will get at their meeting, they can honestly feel has been thoroughly vetted. And that they don't feel they're into a situation where there would be a liability. Staff is the resource that would make sure that it is sound legally. But we would come up with the ideas of what community might want. We're the link. And that's all I had to ask. But I would love your feedback, please.
Thank you, Jan. Really appreciate that. Very well said. And I know Alex is ready to make a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. This is putting me in a little bit of a tough position as the municipal clerk. I did not receive this piece of paper before the presentation. I thought your question, Jan, was about research in relation to the terms of reference. Amendments to the procedural bylaw do not fall within this committee's mandate. I will say I would prefer that we didn't entertain a motion about not having open meetings, The Municipal Act is actually what governs our open meeting agendas, minutes, all of the things that you touched on. This is almost a motion looking at breaking the law, and I can't allow that. It's not just our procedural bylaw. Our procedural bylaw comes from practices and procedures in the Municipal Act. So I think this meeting is for the terms of reference. Mr. Chair, if we could please stay on topic for the purposes of today's business. Like I said, I haven't seen this piece of paper. I will take it into consideration. I do need to look at this a little bit more closely, but I would prefer that we didn't sort of entertain this at our terms of reference workshop, just because of sort of a bunch of different things we're touching on here.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, good point, Alex. So I'll just let Jan make a response to that, and then we'll go from there.
I would say that this should not be a motion. I'm not asking for a motion now. I'm putting the idea out to the committee members. It is on number 2 of your, where are we here now? Number 2 of the agenda there. In the case of a disagreement between these terms of reference and the municipal procedure bylaw, the procedure bylaw shall govern. That's reasonable and it's logical. I'm saying that opens the door for the discussion on the procedural bylaw. What I sent you was research, and this is research. This is based on research. It's the committee members' ability to be able to research without constriction. If research is faulty and a suggestion is made to council and staff presents that suggestion to council, if it is faulty, then council is put in a liability situation. And that is not what we're here to do. We're here to protect the value of heritage in the municipality. And this number 2 does not guarantee that research can be done in an open and thorough manner. This is not making public. Ideas are not sound until they've been processed. The volunteer members they are guided by provincial legislation, by Grey County legislation, by the municipal bylaws, which are many, and they have to stay within the mandate of the advisory committee. And for us, that is in the heritage mandate. So this brings up the question, and I'm saying this is legitimate to be thought of and discussed. A motion is not going to be beneficial at this time. Everybody needs to be able to think about this, especially new members, which may not have read we may not even have made available to you all the different legislation that controls us. We have many, many regulations that we must adhere to. And to pass this number 2 in this area, you are handicapping, literally handicapping your ability to do research.
Thank you, Jan. Any final response from staff on this? Yeah, Alex, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I'm just not clear. I'm sorry. I'm not clear on why this handicaps anybody on doing research. I think this terms of reference workshop was very much so we could hear the committee's thoughts and ideas about what kind of research, how do we implement that? What does that look like? And I have to be honest, I don't think this was the best way to go about it, because like I said, now we're touching on a huge thing. Like we're touching on laws, we're touching on the procedural bylaw, structures, and it's just, I don't think it's appropriate to this discussion, and it's definitely not appropriate to, entertain at this meeting. And the advisory committee, it's not in your mandate to really bring stuff about the procedural bylaw to council. I'm struggling with how that has to do with research. I would love to hear more about what research the committee would like to do, how we can look at that, how we can implement that. But I can't really understand. Like, I can't see how we could possibly do that if we're looking at not having open meetings, because that's not something that's on the table. Like, that's the law.
Denise, please go ahead.
I'm feeling a little uncomfortable myself because we did touch on this. We did talk about this at the training. All of this, the meetings of this committee must be open to the public, subject to the Municipal Act. We can't have, this has been explained many times. So my recommendation is we put this to rest and we don't speak about this any further. If this committee wishes staff to take this to council for a recommendation, we will do that. But I think, Mr. Chair, you already know the answer as well, because you're under the same requirements with council. We don't have the ability to have any meetings that are not open to the public. That's required under section 239 of the Municipal Act. It's really, really clear. And I would like to please move on to another item if we can. I really want to recommend that.
Okay, so I think in this case, and Jan, I'd love to give you the floor, but I think maybe this is something that you and staff could talk about offline. But I do agree that we need to continue to move forward with our workshop here. So if you have one final thing to say, we're going to move on, okay?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am not suggesting a meeting. I'm not suggesting a formal meeting. I'm suggesting that 6 people who have the same interest not be violating any bylaws by getting together and talking about the interest. I'm not talking about going into personal information that's under Privacy Act or anything on any issues or any specific items. That has to be held with transparency at a public meeting. I'm talking about, this seems a little overdone, where you're not allowing 6 people who happen to have the same interest to discuss that interest at a gathering. I'm not asking for a meeting.
So Jan, that's, sorry, Peter, I'll get to you in a
I was
second.
going to say, but from what I'm hearing from the staff is that this is a municipal act requirement.
Yes.
So whether we think it's right or wrong doesn't really matter. And it doesn't mean you couldn't have a social gathering, but you cannot, well, I don't know that, I think what it says is you cannot discuss, you can't have any business meeting. I don't think you're prevented from having a social gathering. If you have a cocktail party or something, you're not offending that, but you're not supposed to be discussing committee work, as I understand. Is that fair?
So if I can just chime in on that.
Sorry.
Yeah, you can't forward the business of your committee. So this is where it becomes very delicate. So as a counselor, I could meet with all of council, but we cannot forward any of the business of council. So that's a very particular thing that we have to be very careful of. Same thing with this committee. You can't meet and have a cocktail party and discuss heritage because we all have heritage common interests. That is forwarding the business of heritage, which is going to violate a lot of different things. So I think, Jan, in your case, if you are looking to make this proposal and perhaps entertain these changes, that might be something to make a presentation to council, because council has the authority to make that decision. The Heritage Advisory Committee does not. So while I do think that you have some good points, I just think this is the wrong venue because we don't have the power to make any of those changes. So maybe give some consideration to making a presentation to council and providing your information, and then we can have a fulsome discussion at that point in time.
Does council have the power to make those changes, or is it municipal?
Well, if anybody has the power
Right.
within
It would be
council's
council.
mandate, yes. So that would be
Yeah.
something. I'm not
Certainly
an
we
expert in
don't,
that.
but I mean,
Right.
I don't know
Yes.
whether council does or whether it's
So-
in statutes, but.
To the chair, number 2 in this, then, this will not hamper, if this is agreed to and passed, it will not hamper a discussion later on. I'm talking more social. It was with the old committee, we were not allowed to gather. It's gathering is one thing. I'm not talking a meeting. I'm not talking motions. I'm not talking direction. I'm not talking advancing heritage, other than perhaps saying, I've noticed something, the rock cuts in Sydenham Township, they're gorgeous. Shouldn't they be protected? Now, if that's forwarding, I know the wording would have to be very careful, but I'm saying before in the old committee, we ran into a situation where we couldn't gather. That's all I'm asking for. If number 2 is not hampering that, I have no problems with that, because there must be structure or you can't possibly move forward on anything. You've just got chaos. And with heritage, we're in such a delicate position because the heritage treasures are not owned by the municipality. That's all. I just want to be clear that we can be social.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm ready to put this one to bed for the purposes of our terms of reference discussion today. I'll just turn it over to Vic. Please go ahead.
And I'm moving on from that, but somewhat related. Actually, Denise was asked last time if about working groups and subcommittees, which is something that's included in Jim's draft. I think this is something we need to look at, and if it does have to be that we are less than quorum in a subcommittee or a working group, that's fine. But if we are able to include people from outside the actual Heritage Committee, that would help bring up the numbers without messing with quorum and spread the work around. So let's say there was a research subgroup to determine how many stone buildings we had or something like that. Could we do that with 3 members and 2 outside members of the public, set up a subcommittee, and how do we allow for that in the terms of reference?
Any comments on that? Denise, thank you.
So I think in the past, what we did was people in the meeting agreed to meet together, like 2 people, and go do work, or sometimes 3 people. And we called them working groups. I think what we're trying to avoid is another committee group that we have to take minutes and do all that stuff and provide staff resources. But we recognize that in the past, it has worked that, 2 people going and looking at what kind of documents could guide repair of brickwork or something like that worked very well, because they can, over a coffee table, talk about what, how to divide up that work. I'm not against that. I know that we're just trying to keep from ending up having to provide additional meeting resources. So if this is sort of an ad hoc thing where 2 people can go away and do some research on a topic like that, we've had good success in this committee in the past with those. And those were ad hoc groups. So rather than a subcommittee, like a formal subcommittee structure where we had another working group that went off and we named it in here. We could tweak this if that was what the committee would like, to allow for some working group opportunities. But I think those would be an ad hoc basis. So if this committee decided that a plaque program is something that you'd like to look into, and 2 people want to go away and do that research, because that it's probably easier for you to do it on your own time than waiting for staff to come back with information. Sometimes that's definitely true. I don't have any problem with that, but I think it would be on an ad hoc basis versus like a subcommittee of the committee, if that makes sense. And then that way, if 2 people say, yeah, I'm really interested in brick, I want to go look at that, or even 1 person, that could be done. And in the past, that is how we did it. They may be just for a few months, or maybe one month or something like that. And then they can come back with information to the committee and share it. Is that something that makes sense?
I think it's preferable to keep it informal, frankly, because the problem when no offense, but when you get you guys involved, there's obviously huge additional expense, and it's not probably necessary, because what we're talking about, I think Vic's envisaging, and I think most of us are envisaging something on a sort of lower scale, just as a preliminary kind of steps to see what further things. And if they came back and said, well, we need the staff, and then you make it more formal. But I think that's the way to go.
Sorry, Denise, go ahead. I'll let you.
I was just going to say, could we, on here, it says no subcommittee shall be formed except as explicitly approved through council resolution. We could flesh that out a little bit differently, so that there's the ability, if council has, for a good example would be if it's in mandated material, like within the mandate, if the mandate's fleshed out a little bit to allow for the non-statutory, and council said, we'd love a program, please go work on that. And then a subcommittee is formed based on that that would still meet within this. Do you know what I'm saying? Like this would still capture that. Is there a way that we can flesh this out a little bit to allow for subcommittees, instead of saying no subcommittees, but subcommittees could be struck based on non-statutory projects or whatever.
Well,
Do you know what I'm saying? In the frame of it in the positive rather
Well, like
than,
that paragraph, you could add this section will not prevent, will specifically not prevent the committee from arranging ad hoc committees.
ad hoc sub-working groups
not
or
involving
something.
Staff or something like that, because that's what they're concerned about. I'm sure there's the cost of staff, as they should be.
Or I think also could be potentially avoiding what happened before where we ended up with all this work that we did that didn't end up being
Well,
furthered. So that's always a
But I
struggle.
guess the council doesn't care if we waste our time. They don't want us to waste your time. You know, I mean,
We do care. just-
Well,
I
you-
hope we care about
you know
everyone's
what I-
time.
You know what I'm saying? It's less important. And I understand they should be more concerned about your time than ours. If we're volunteers, if we want to do it, I guess we can do it. But I'm just thinking that section, just say that this section specifically does not prevent the committee from arranging or having ad hoc committees of board members, of committee members, which do not involve staff. Or something to that extent.
So would it work then for me to reframe that on a positive rather than the negative that's here and just allow for that, extra little piece that Peter's mentioning? Is that good?
You guys are happy with that? Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Leaving it the way it is will reassure council that we're not, up to something. So the problem is if you change it the other way around, they might feel you're trying to, and I'm assuming that's standard wording anyway. Right? Or probably, maybe not.
I think this is new, but I'm not sure. I think it's because this might not be the only committee that has had subcommittees formed. And so we've had it too, and maybe it was just to put a lid on it. So it's like subcommittees would be subject to council's direction or something. That's what I'm thinking.
You have to have minutes and you have to be involved. So that's why they care about that.
Right. And then I think, but in the past, when we went away and did work in this committee, and I can say it worked really well. I mean, I don't know who might have been. Jan and Vic definitely were on the committee then, and certainly Jim was on the committee at that time when we did some of those tasks. Going away with two people and saying we'll work on something did work really well to further some of those non-statutory responsibilities versus the statutory stuff was generally related to files and applications.
I think that's partly what Jan is envisaging, that people have that ability. The problem is you can't get in too big or suddenly you're violating the rules. I noticed we did have one of my very first meetings, there was a note that was sent, I think, by the chair about the fact that I think some people had met or something, and we were reminded of the rule that prevented us from having meetings, sort of private meetings if they involved a quorum. So, I mean, hopefully that people still have the right to talk. If you and I want to have a talk about what about the last meeting and go for a coffee or something, that's not forbidden. It's just you can't have a group that could swing the whole committee, obviously. So.
Correct. That's great. Any other comments here? Vic, did you have your hand up earlier? No, you're good? Okay. So how's everybody feeling about this section? We're looking good so far? Okay, so that was administration. So now we're on to section G, which is roles. And welcome discussion from the committee here. Just let everybody take a minute to just review your notes. Yes, Vic, please.
It's hard to kind of compare the two, but it seems that in the official draft here, when it comes to committee members' roles, the only one really outside of, fairly standard requirements to be prepared, et cetera, is conduct research on request and report back to the committee. In the other version, there are a number of roles there that I think could potentially be included. I haven't gone through and itemized them. But again, it would be a matter of, are there any of those that shouldn't be in the committee's role?
When that sort of the obligation of committee member to public support the recommendations of the committee. Now, I expect you, when we would, because we're voting on it, but, and I'm not particularly contrarian, but if somebody took a contrary position, I think they should have the right, if they want to publicly say this, you know, I was opposed to that, which this seems to suggest you can't do that. Unless I'm missing something. I mean, I'm sure most people are going to, like, that's why we're here. We're on the same team, hopefully most of the time, but someone could have an objection. They might think the committee is wrong. And I don't think they should be prevented from saying that they think the committee, that they took a different position, which that seems to say.
Thanks, Peter. Jan, please go ahead.
I agree in a way that you can have a difference of opinion, but publicly, actually, it's the chairman that is the voice of us. We don't have the authority or the position to make a statement to the public.
But this seems to require that the public support the recommendation. So,
well, we do because we voted.
no, right, but maybe I voted against it.
Well, yes, but like I'm losing a vote today.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say you lost a vote.
I'm not going to go out and publicly talk
No.
about it. Like, it's just, you put it to the committee, you ask the committee how they want to stand as a unified group. The vote is the vote, may agree or not agree. The chairman is the person who really is the spokesman. I'm just concerned because it's human nature not to take things factual, to take things in personalities. So you have to be a little careful. I'm just bringing this up to your point. I agree that it's hard to swallow something you don't agree with, but if it's the vote of the committee.
The position of the committee would be clearer, but I'm simply saying in the similar way that if the municipality voted on something, that doesn't mean every elected member of the council is then prevented from saying, I support the position that we take it. It's the position of council, like I accept it, right? And you can say for different reasons I opposed it, but of course I accept it. And I'm not working, I don't think you're working against it, but I think you can have a contrary point of view, right? I mean, look, I don't see this arising very often.
No.
I may never arise. It just seems like an odd thing where one is required to publicly support the recommendations when perhaps it's one you didn't agree with. That's all. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Simon.
I think it's probably more to do with the phrasing that we're not outwardly broadcasting on social media that we disagree with an opinion within the committee. Whether or not we agree or disagree is the role of the chair and the minutes to publicly declare our quorum.
Yeah, so maybe you want to have wording rather than that, something like, we'll take no actions to reflect poorly on the committee or something like that, if that's really all we're concerned about. You don't want someone saying, oh, the chair is a jerk and he did this or something. I mean, I understand. I just used an example. There was a random example. It was not meant to say anything. I mean, I understand the idea of it. It's just that it seems to be that once the committee's made a decision that suddenly you're not allowed to say anything about it, and that seems odd to me. But as I say, it's more of a theoretical risk, I think, than a real one.
To our clerk, Alex, do you have any feedback with regards to wording on that at all?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. I think there's a few things, and we'll circle back to the code of conduct. I think the word support can mean a lot of different things. It could mean just simply, if you were to be talking about a recommendation made in the public that you didn't agree with, you could sort of go back to the record, go back to the minutes, what was actually published. And then if you had your own opinion about some sort of disagreement, there's probably a way that you could speak to that. I don't think this is meant to sort of, I mean, we could also change the word support if that helps to a different word, if maybe.
Sorry, I'm just not exactly sure why it's necessary to have that particular reference, because if it's covered, there probably are terms in our code of conduct that we have to behave and that we can't disparage the committee or other committee members or something like that. I'm sure there's wording to that effect in the code, isn't it? Must be.
Yeah, sorry, through the chair, yeah, the code of conduct has to do with behavior and respecting rules of procedure and things like that. So why don't we look at that?
Yeah.
And maybe we can think about what that actually means, because I think there's a little bit more to it than just publicly support. It could go more into like a communications approach. What is our message? Things like that. So we can look a little bit more into that, and then we'll bring it back for the next meeting.
Well, I mean, I guess one's allowed to have personal opinions, but the committee has made a decision, then that is the committee's decision. But as an individual, one can still have opinions, right? But you cannot purport to speak on behalf of the committee or something like that. But anyway.
Great. So we'll see what that looks like when we come back with the next meeting. Yes, Jan, please go ahead.
Just a caution on that, if you're dealing with a landowner and they come in and they want to do something, and the committee goes through everything thoroughly, and they make the recommendation to allow or to modify. I don't know, I'm not legal, so I'm not sure if that could give them some type of base if a member went against the decision, whether that could be a litigation base. We want to avoid any problems legally.
Well, I'm assuming that the vote is public, right? So they would know that if a member voted against it. So it would only be a question of them presumably advocating for a position in support of their rejection of the position of the committee. But I mean, again, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's just something that's struck me as, you know, I think you don't want to contradict this is the position of the committee. I have a personal view that's different than that. You should be allowed to say that, I would think. You know?
Yeah, understood. I think we'll put our trust in staff to find some appropriate wording for that, right? Yeah, so I think we're good there. All right, so we're still on rolls here. Any other comments or feedback with regards to this section? No, I think we've covered that. Okay, wonderful. So let's go on to the last section, section H, which is reporting. And give you a moment just to review your notes, and please let me know if you have any comments or suggestions for this. All right, is everybody okay? Vic, please go ahead.
Once again, I'll refer to Jim's draft. Number 3 on reporting on the official draft is the chair and CEO shall have discretionary authority to determine how recommendations from the HAC are brought forward to council. Bullet 3 on Jim's is regarding basically the idea that prior to the report to council, that the committee have an opportunity to see the draft recommendations. And I know that this is based on a couple of specific instances in the past where we have felt that what was recommended or reported to council did not accurately reflect what went on in the meeting. And I mean, generally speaking, it shouldn't be a problem, but it has occasionally been a problem. And it would be better not to be kind of policing the report after the fact, but if we could have some input, and he has tried to limit it here, 48 hours for comments. I wonder if we can somehow incorporate this into the terms of reference.
Thoughts on that, Alex or Denise? What do you guys think?
So can I just clarify? So what is being discussed is whether or not staff would draft, say, for example, if there was a heritage permit, we brought a report to the committee, and then the committee made a recommendation on what the permit itself. And then we would be bringing a report to council following that, and whether or not the committee could see that draft report ahead of council seeing it and provide input. that doesn't work within our normal process. I think what I would want to know is what types of examples are you seeking to avoid so that we can make sure we bring forward the appropriate and the most accurate information. So what we have done is attach the previous staff report. So we've attached the report of the Heritage Advisory Committee's report that staff provided. And then I can think of at least one example where we did recommend something different. And that was because we recommended what we had actually heard the committee say they wanted, and then they changed it. And so we just wanted to make sure that we put that on the table. So they changed it because they thought they couldn't ask for that. And so we said, well, no, we can recommend this particular piece of advice. So that's the only one I can think of. But if it's that is the concern that the report won't be furthering the recommendations that the committee had made? Because I think the liaison being the chair, for example, would make sure that what was brought forward would be the same, if you know what I'm saying. If there was a case, I can't think of one where, you know, they made a recommendation, but we didn't let council know what that was. I think we always cut and paste the recommendation into the report directly. But there may be some sentiment that's said about why that staff will still have a different approach. Like if new information is received, we may have to include that because something may have changed. But we've been doing those very quickly. So if a report comes to this committee, recommendations made, we've been trying to get it on the very next meeting so that we can move the files along appropriately.
Sorry, what can we receive, like, for example? I see
And
that-
sorry, Peter, I just want
Sorry.
to interrupt. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'll give you the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to make sure we have order here. But please go ahead. Thank you.
Well, it seems like there's two aspects. The committee chair provides a verbal report. I suppose that could be in writing and could be copied to the board members. I don't know how much work that is, but like how much, I don't want to make an onerous responsibility. I'm assuming your report would be relatively brief. I'm assuming, but you can let me know. And I guess then the other thing is, should we be receiving a copy of the recommendations that are made to council from the committee? Do we normally get those? And if we don't, should we?
Denise, you want to comment on that?
So the recommendations, I mean, maybe I'm missing something here. So feel free to correct me, but my understanding is they're captured by resolution. So the resolution in its entirety is included. So there isn't any other recommendations that I'm aware of.
Basically, the resolution, we should already know what that is, unless Nick knows something different.
Alex, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. The resolution is always in the minutes. So you'll see the minutes after the meeting is done. And I also note down the nature of the discussion as well. So that serves as our record of the meeting. And again, that goes into our records retention bylaws. And that's sort of where that comes from. So in terms of the report that goes to council after our meeting, yes, Denise or whoever on her team that's writing the report copies and pastes that recommendation into the council report so that they can see what the recommendation was from the Heritage Committee.
Jan, yes, please.
Just a clarification through the chair. The chairman then of the committee, the municipal staff present the recommendations. The chairman of our committee, does that councillor get to speak directly to that so that that councillor knows what was going on within the meeting? So the councillor would speak, not just, it would be just not just staff making the presentation. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Yep, I have the opportunity to speak there. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving on. Any other comments with regards to this section H? Okay, I think we'll put that one to bed. So, all right, very good. That concludes everything on the draft terms of reference here. Do we have any closing comments or remarks by staff at all? Are you guys good? Okay, wonderful. Any closing remarks from anybody here at the table? Vic, please.
Again, I'm looking back to Jim's draft and I think there was something in there about a budget. Because we're working with this draft, it's hard to make sure we haven't missed a lot of stuff that was in here. But I guess generally the idea would be, we haven't had this in the past. But it would be on which version? Sorry. Oh, on, okay, yeah, yes, thank you. Okay, 1.25. 9, there it is. Yeah, the MHAC will propose an annual budget for submission to council with some well-defined goals and objectives. It would be nice to have this potential, not that it necessarily has to be used, but there are times where I think once someone went to a provincial conference on heritage, but there might be other things where there would be costs involved, potentially even regarding research. So by including this, we would have that option. Is that something we can do?
Peter, go ahead.
I just wondered how, you were here, how was that done in the past? Or maybe the staff can tell us how it was done in the past, maybe with just an ad hoc request.
Denise?
So to my knowledge, this committee's never had a budget. There's no fees collected and there were no specific budget lines allotted to it that I'm aware of. I haven't seen any, and we've talked about that, about whether or not we need to add something. I don't know if Alex knows anything different than me.
Jan?
I don't know if there's been a specific, I doubt there's been a specific allocated budget, but there is costs and there have been monies used in the past. An example, there is a study done 2002 on all heritage properties on the old, it's from Meaford to Owen Sound on Highway 26, it's called now. All those properties have been documented, and there's pictures and everything else. And with the last group, we were given the directive, I made copies for all the members so they would have that just as a reference, because it is a substantial document, and that was paid for by the council somehow. I mean, it was requested, it was done by Meaford Library, were very good to do it. So there has been monies, and I know that one person was given some monies from attending a convention that was necessary for information. So there must be a budget. I mean, there has to be a budget somewhere because staff is costing here, being here. So there must be a budget, but it's not dedicated as a budget. Maybe it's just whatever we need to function they allow us to have. Not sure.
Go ahead, Denise. Thank you.
I can just reiterate, it's just been built into, that's why it is a challenge. I agree that it probably needs some sort of budget to allow for things like training or to have, conference attendance and things like that. But my understanding from reviewing it with finance is there is no budget for this committee. And so we've taken any monies from other budgets. So I think that it's a good point that we need to do something. But currently, I'm not sure what our process would be. We're hedging in a budget season now in terms of developing budgets and starting to do the background research and all of that. And so it's a good time for us to take a hard look at that. But to my knowledge, we didn't have a budget for this committee specifically, and we didn't have any resources to provide because of that. So if we've done anything, we probably reallocated funds, probably through the normal channels, but we reallocated them from something else.
So Denise, would it make sense that if the committee wanted to pursue that they would make a recommendation that council consider allocating budget funds to the committee? Alex, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I think because the budget process for next year is approaching, I think it would be a great idea for one of you to attend one of the public meetings and maybe suggest that to council. I want to encourage you to attend meetings and speak to council about these things. If that way you're speaking right to them. So we're going to have several budget meetings coming up, I think, going into the fall and into next year. So that would be a good avenue.
Great, thanks, Alex. Yes, Peter. Oh, sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
It would be very difficult to establish a budget because we wouldn't know what we need. So it would just be, give us $100, but we might not spend the $100. So logistically, I think it would be foolish to establish a budget.
And you were suggesting that that someone speak, I take it you mean sort of one of our ad hoc committees would be speaking as opposed to as a personal individual from the community, would be there as a representative of the community?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes and no, because you are members of the community, but you're also more than welcome to attend a budget meeting, just like any other member of the public, and say that the Heritage Advisory Committee, we need more of a budget towards heritage, or Heritage Matters, or just feedback in general. You wouldn't necessarily be representing the committee in that, but if it's an opinion that you might have, we always encourage participation in that way.
But if we don't have a budget, and we've dealt with this in the past, I gather somehow they just sort of make a one-off special request. Is that kind of what happens? And it's accepted by council? And maybe that's all we need at the moment, Although whether you want to have that term, as Vic has suggested, have the term in our frames of reference as the ability to do so in the future if needed, or that maybe the council will consider requests for funding of special projects or individual items from the committee from time to time, something like, I don't know whether you need it or not. They've been doing it.
Well, good suggestions. And of course, with public participation through the budget process, you don't necessarily have to be here in person. There are a lot of other ways that you can send your comments electronically, and those will all get addressed at the appropriate time as well. But good discussion on that. Yes, thank you, guys. Okay, so I'm about to conclude the meeting unless anybody has any final thoughts or remarks they want to make. No. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for their time today. We had a great discussion, and everybody's due for a nap later. But with that said, I will conclude today's meeting. Thank you.